Hey, really quick before we start the show, did you know that we are on YouTube, Instagram, and Instagram TV? Please check us out on those platforms and subscribe. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Blowout Growth Network. I'm Gio Auritas, your host. Thanks for joining us today. Hello and welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at the Blowout Growth Network. Today's guest brings a unique blend of business acumen and ministry to his current gig, but Mr. Ryan Ermeling has a lot of experience behind him. And we're really excited to have him on the show today to talk about how he built an amazing company called Stretch Internet, what that company did, how he blew it out with growth, and going to get some pro tips and tricks from somebody who is what I consider to be a serial entrepreneur. Would you say, Ryan, would you say that's an accurate title for what you really truly are? Sure, I mean, you're so much more. You're a husband, you're a father, you're on several boards, and you influence several different aspects of what your current mission is, which we'll talk about too. You're an all-around amazing dude, just an amazing guy to know. I'm really thankful to be friends with you. You always bring some insight, some innovation, and definitely positivity every single time I see you. So it's a great honor, and it's a great honor to introduce Mr. Ryan Ermeling. Say hello to everybody, Ryan.
Hey, everyone. And thanks, Gio. It's good to spend time with you just chatting, but appreciate our friendship. And likewise, I've been inspired by your story and your ventures and everything you do as a human as well. So good to connect with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Everybody that's been following us now and kind of getting on this Blowout Growth Network idea, tend to be hashtag entrepreneurs. Also, they like to call themselves hashtag hustlers. And I think I definitely fit that hashtag. So I identify hashtag hustler. But just to start out, because I like to do this with all of our guests to get an idea for everybody, where everybody is at different ages and stages of their life. So how old are you?
I am 46.
46.
Yep.
And
you're at that stage where you got to think twice before you answer.
You got to make sure you're telling the truth.
Right.
Ryan, for everybody, I'd like you to give us an idea. What's your definition of success?
Yeah, when I think of success, Gio, my mind doesn't go to the business side or to the entrepreneurship side or to the dollar side. I think success for me is all about, do you have your priorities in the right order? And so I guess I'd look at it this way. When I'm gone and passed from this world, and people look at me and say, was he successful or not? To me, I'm successful if they said, you know what, he was about his faith first, his family second, his friends third, and then his business life, his ambition, his ventures, whatever it might be, fourth. So I think if you look at it that way, all the other, that fourth category tends to fall into place if you have focus on the right priorities outside of that. So certainly there's other definitions or levels of success you can define within your own ambitions, but in terms of holistically how I view success in my life, it's always kind of its constant checks and balances. Do I have my priorities right? Am I putting enough focus on my faith and my family, my friends, first and foremost? And so it might be a little bit of a different definition than you've heard, but for me, it's a more holistic look at my life.
Well, it's certainly something that I have heard. And it's been interesting how many people that I've interviewed so far have said something similar. And it's cool because I think the audience gets to see now where that proper mindset really is to achieve the blowout growth that they want in their businesses and their personal lives. There's a lot of successes I know that you've had, Ryan. But before we get into those, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how you were and how when you were younger, and how did you grow up? And honestly, did you always know what you wanted to do? Like, for example, did you know that you were always, entrepreneurial, or that you were going to be a businessman, or, take us down that path. Tell me about how you grew up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a pastor's kid, so I have that perspective. Right, grew up as a pastor's kid. Was actually born in your old neck of the woods in Chicago. Only lived there for a year, and then primarily raised in the Southwest, in California, Arizona, etc. And had a good childhood. I mean, awesome parents, great brother, strong, supportive family. Anchored again in faith, and they, my parents really created that legacy that I'm trying now to bring to my kids and my family. So really supportive family. I don't have that troubled childhood story that you sometimes hear, right? And I'm grateful and thankful for that. In answer to your second question, no, I did not know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I was a creative type, and somebody who liked to create. When I say create, not so much with my hands and that type, but more like with my mind. Yeah, I like to write. I like to draw to a certain extent. I liked to do stuff on computers as that became more and more. So really, when I got into college and then out of college, like I found a job that at the time was a perfect storm for me, and it was working in athletic media relations for college sports. And it combined all the loves of my life, which were sports. And I was a math guy, so I got to do statistics, and I got to write stories, and I got to design media guides, do some graphic design. So a lot of creation and that type of thing. And it was really the perfect job. But I call myself an entrepreneur by accident because it literally was a series or sequence of events that drove me to finally explore and go down that side of the road, so to speak. And I don't know how much detail you want here.
I want as much detail as you care to give. I mean, how important is it to your success of the things that you created to grow?
Sure. Well, I think the story here will illustrate a couple things. So when I worked at Cal State Fullerton in athletic media relations with their baseball team. In fact, the last game I ever worked for them was the College World Series championship when we beat Texas. So I had a chance to work with a pretty cool program, and that was a ton of fun. But about a year and a half before I quit, my boss walked into my office one day, and we were doing, this was back in 2002, 03. We were doing audio streaming of our baseball games online through Yahoo. And it was actually through a derivative of the company Mark Cuban had built and sold for $4 billion to Yahoo.
Broadcom, right?
Broadcast.com, yeah.
Broadcast.com, that was it.
Yeah. And so they had grandfathered us in. We were the first college baseball team ever broadcast in their service, but then Yahoo got them, and Yahoo comes to us and says, hey, we're going to start charging you $250 a game. We didn't have that type of budget at Cal State Fullerton. So my boss comes into the office one day. He knew I liked to play around with tech a little bit, and said, hey, is there any way we could do this in-house? And so I went to work and just started brainstorming and troubleshooting and creating and coming up with a way that we actually started broadcasting audio through our own in-house equipment and found an in-house way to do it. And we did that for about a year, pretty effectively. And it took a few people who saw what we were doing and said, hey, you should market that idea. That's pretty cool. And it just went in one ear, out the other. I mean, I literally just did not have the entrepreneurship gene at that point. And finally, something registered with me. I said, you know what, there might be something to that. And so I went and, got a business license and created some brochures and went to a trade show. And sure enough, there was kind of immediate interest, and I knew I kind of hit on something, and it grew pretty rapidly year over year after that. But the point, I think, back to the success piece is, I think one of the things that I've always been able to do is look for a way, right? Realize that there's a way. Being persistent and almost being up for a challenge. If somebody says, hey, can we do this? I don't know how, but can we do it? Being the person to help find a way to do that. And I think that that trait, which I didn't necessarily always maybe connect with the entrepreneurial spirit, they're so linked, right? And so I think having that trait and that ability really helped me as I did get into growing my business, and having that never quit, always find a way attitude, especially when you're small, is so vital, right? So
did you, before Stretch, did you start any other businesses?
No.
Before? So no. Stretch was your first business?
Yep.
And how old were you when you started it?
27.
27. And you ran that business for how long before you ended up getting acquired?
15 years.
15 years.
Yep.
So tell me about that. Tell me about Stretch. Tell me about how you got acquired by Presto Sports. Tell me about building your first company.
Yeah, let's back up to the beginning because it's a fun story. So, I mean,
Great.
I was a classic garage business, right? And so when I started, we were only doing audio streaming at that time for college athletics. We weren't doing video yet. It was out there, but not very prevalent yet. And there was some, network speeds weren't fast enough. And there were all kinds of hurdles back in 02, 03 with that. So I cleared out my garage and we acquired our audio from schools over phone lines, right? And so I went out and again, I had to research all this and figure out how to do this. But we got 4 T1s coming into our garage in my house. I ordered them. So we had 72 phone lines coming into my garage. And I had 17 EMAC, those old all-in-one EMAC computers, lining a bit on these industrial racks in my garage. And you walked in, there's lights flashing and blinking. I mean, it looked like a war zone in there.
Like a Dan Aykroyd Chevy Chase movie from the 80s.
That's right. That's right. Spies like us.
That's what I'm envisioning.
But it was crazy. And so that's how we started. And I just kind of built this thing. I piecemealed it together, figured out what worked, experimented a ton, had 12 schools my first year. And, I remember vividly that it was funny because all this equipment was in the garage, but I had an office kind of on the other side of the house that I did a lot of my administrative work, and we'd monitor the broadcast, make sure everything was okay. But anytime there's an issue with the broadcast, if the volume was too low or high, I'd have to go back in the garage and adjust it. So Lindsay, my wife, just can recount just seeing me all day, like on busy sports days, walking back and forth between my office and the garage. Because I'm just constantly, monitoring and adjusting and it was a one-man show. I mean, by my third year, that was the last year I was solo. We had probably 100 schools at that point, and on a busy Saturday, we might have 200-300 events on the schedule. Maybe
for the audience, could you just briefly tell everybody what it is? Because you're talking about getting schools on and stuff. I don't want everybody to get moved off.
I'm sorry. I'll back up a little bit, but we'd contract out with the college to broadcast their sporting events. So during basketball season, they might have a women's and a men's basketball game on the same day. And so they would call us up, and literally a broadcaster over a phone line would broadcast the game. We'd acquire that audio and then send it out and stream it so people could listen to it. Right. So on a busy Saturday, we'd have a couple hundred games, and it was just me monitoring, responding to fan requests, support requests, and troubleshooting issues. I mean, it was a crazy time, but that's another valuable lesson I learned is you got to grind, man. I'm fortunate I was the age I was. And it's not to say that, somebody who's a little bit older can't grind and start something like that. But it's almost like I was too naive to know any better, right? You just figure, hey, this is how it is. You just work your butt off and at some point, hopefully things click. But,
well, it's funny though, right? Because this is something we do talk about on the channel a lot, especially on some of our side videos, not so much in the interviews, but everybody, has this different definition of working hard. And so it's, that's just something that, like, when you're young, okay, I have to work hard. It's something you hear like, yeah, I'll remember that again. Right.
Right.
But, and then you kind of fall into rank, but I think you said it a little bit earlier, you said the grind. So to talk about that just for a minute, what is that definition? Because it's so vague. Oh, I'm just going to work hard. But what does that mean though? You know what I mean? Like, what do you have to focus on while you're quote unquote grinding?
Yeah. I think it's just realizing that there are going to be certain periods of your life where I go back to those priorities, right? There are times where inevitably things are going to be a little bit out of whack out of necessity. And so when I started Stretch, listen, I had a safety net, and this is something else we can talk about if you'd like, but I intentionally kept working at Fullerton for the first year while I was building Stretch because I wanted that safety net. So I was working 40 to 60 hours, depending on the time of year at Stretch. And unfortunately, I had a boss who was awesome and flexible with my hours. And then I'd be working another 30 to 50 hours, depending on the week, growing my business. So I'd come home at night and work till 12, 1, 2 in the morning, growing.
It was your side hustle. That's what you're saying. It was your side hustle.
Exactly. It was my side hustle. And it's a grind. And I think, again, it was it was a passion. I enjoyed what I did, so that was a big part of it, right? And it's easier to grind and to spend time doing that type of thing.
It doesn't feel like work when you're passionate about it, does it?
It doesn't feel like work, and just I think knowing that, hey, hard work now is going to pay off later, right? And that was a big part of it too, knowing that, hey, it's not going to be like this forever. But right now, right here, I'm going to have to put in that work and time, and yeah, I might be tired at times, and I might need to re-examine my priorities and get those in check a little bit. But there's going to be this time right now where I'm just going to have to realize, yeah, there's going to be some serious work ahead here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's really good too, because now you've defined it a little bit. It's a little something that is actual for people, and realize, we talk about this too on the show, the importance of finding something that you're passionate about. There's one of the things that I've been, believe it or not, Ryan, consulting with a lot of our clients. They've been, especially ones that are in this blowout growth phase, have been having difficulty with that, that very point. So it's always interesting to talk about that. So tell me more about Stretch, and how did you end up getting acquired by Presto Sports?
Yeah. So we, for about 15 years, he had the business, at double-digit growth year over year, and with the exception of 1 year. So I think 14 to 15 years we had double-digit growth. So we were having tremendous growth. We were named to the Inc. 5000 list a couple times, which is the 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in the U.S., which was cool to have that honor as well. But toward the about a year before we were acquired, a number of factors came into play for me. One was the field was becoming extremely competitive, which, don't get me wrong, I didn't mind competing, but there were a lot of market forces at play, which were causing us to have to start to look at our pricing models and maybe in some cases be a little bit more aggressive than we'd like with pricing, and make some choices that I just wasn't thrilled about. There were, the streaming was becoming more and more ubiquitous. People could do it on their own. Whereas, when we started, it was something that was a little bit more of a niche, and you needed support and help and people to guide you along. There were a number of things along those lines. And I also was getting to the point where I was ready for my next too. So anyway, all these factors kind of merged at the same time and caused me to want to go down the road of saying, hey, we might be a pretty popular target for a certain type of company. And sure enough, went through the process. We engaged an actual mergers and acquisition broker to represent us and go through the whole process of creating marketing materials and doing pre-due diligence and the whole 9 yards, right? Getting everything kind of lined up and prepared for that journey. And then we went to market, and we had probably, I want to say we had 22 or 23 what are called IOIs, indications of interest, basically companies or individuals or venture capital firms saying, hey, we like what we see. Here's a tentative structure for an offer that we would want to make once we learn more, et cetera. And we ended up talking, I think, 4 or 5 of those in depth, and one of them became a pretty clear match. It was Presto Sports is the name of the company that acquired us, but it was under a broader holding company with a venture capital firm called Battery out of Boston, international, but headquartered in Boston. And it was a perfect combination of both the strategic partner, but also somebody that had some capital that they could, that they were looking to basically invest and help grow some different companies. It was a perfect combination of those two factors for us. And I'll tell you what, Gio, the timing was as good as it can get. I mean, if you go back and you put a dot on when I started my company, and you put a dot on today, right now, when you and I are talking, and there's a timeline in between those two dots. And if I had to pick, you could almost go down to say a single week, which would have been the most optimal time for me to sell. It was probably the week that we closed. The timing was so perfect. I think if we'd waited longer, things would have started to become even more competitive in that marketplace, and we would have started to see maybe some negative traction. We had some plans to grow and diversify our business, don't get me wrong, but we were at our peak, and I think fortunately I was able to realize that we were at our peak, and that was the time to really kind of put your chips on the table and say, here we go. And so that's probably the single most important decision I made was that timing aspect, and not trying to, sometimes when you try to time things too perfectly, this as somebody who's in real estate and other investments, right? It can go south in a hurry.
Sure.
But I was able to see the
timing is everything.
Yeah, it is. I was able to see the leading indicators that showed me, hey, this is the right time and the right opportunity, and that was huge.
So here you are, you're sitting on this opportunity to have a liquidity event on something that you started working on in your garage, and you grew the business from zero to, what was your top line when you were prepared to sell? What was your top line?
Just over 4 million annually.
So from zero in your garage to just over 4 million, and now you're putting this big valuation on your company, because it sounds to me like you grew to a point where it needed to be acquired by a larger company, an entity that had the ability to take on the different changes that you were seeing in the business. And you said, you know what, it's time for, this is the time, this is my time to check out, to take this liquidity event and help me to go to what you referred to earlier as what's next. So here you are at this moment, and you're ready to do that. I want to stop there for a second. We'll come back there, but I want to rewind a little bit into that, because there's a couple of things that intrigue me that I get asked a lot by some of my clients, my consulting clients, and some people that just follow are interested in knowing some things. And so, first of all, did you have any naysayers along the way? And did anybody, help you out along the way? Did you have, was everybody out there be like, Brian, you can't do this, forget about it, it's not going to happen? Did you have anybody like that? And then did you have anybody, that went the other way, that, helped you out in some fashion?
Yeah, good questions. I don't know that I had a ton of naysayers, but it's also because I don't know that, again, here's where I almost say I'm glad I was naive. And what I mean by that is, if I had gone through the process of doing market research and putting together a business plan and getting tens of opinions on dozens of opinions on this, I might have been scared into not pursuing it. And I was just so naive. I had an idea. I was like, yeah, let's just do it and see what happens type. I didn't put a business plan together. I didn't seek a mentor, which, I'm not saying there's not great advantages in doing that, but I didn't talk to a lot of people. I just had an idea and went. And I think sometimes that's underrated.
Kind of what you do when you're 27 though, right? And
that's right.
Just, hungry, and hey, I see a hole in the market, I want to fill it.
Yeah. And I just went. I was too naive to know that this thing might fail. Right. At that age, you're like, hey, what the heck? You know what I mean?
That's a great way of saying
it. There's so much. That's such an underrated concept. I think now, listen, if you're trying to get, millions of dollars in seed funding or get some venture capital backing early on in building a business, and yeah, you need to have a business plan, and you need to find, the right people to help you and mentor you along the way, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you're trying to bootstrap something and just grow it, it's almost just dive in and learn as you go, and try to have this mindset that of course it's going to work, right? And not that you close your eyes and put your blinders on completely to what the market's telling you. At some point that's important, and you've got to respond to that. But you can't let that just dash your dreams and your hopes and because you hear from. So to answer your question, I remember probably within a month or two after I started, there was another guy in the industry, company called Teamline, that had for years been doing audio, but it was over a phone line. You could call in and listen to a game over a phone. It was kind of right.
I remember that.
Right before streaming went out. And I remember calling this guy because my business model was, hey, schools pay a flat annual fee per year. I think it was $2,500, and they can broadcast as many games as they want. And his model was you pay per minute, and I remember just calling him at one point and just saying, what's the harm in picking this guy's brain? And he was, and I don't know if he was threatened or if he legitimately thought it wouldn't work, but I remember him saying, good luck with that. I think you're going down the wrong path. And it's
interesting. Your competition was short-sighted.
They were either short-sighted or trying to intimidate me. Right. And one or the other. And bottom line is like, just kind of ignored them. Right. And
well, you believed in it. And I'm sure, and this is something too, I want to ask you, to have that kind of confidence though, to be able to say, yeah, you know what, it's going to be successful. I'm going to move forward with this. I'm going to find a way, right? That's what you've said. I think that in order to get to that level of confidence, you have to have at least done a good amount of research to know that this was a path to, to filling some kind of a hole, right? You didn't just wake up with an idea and blindly be like, yo, I'm going this way.
Sure.
We're going to paint the castle pink, right? It doesn't.
That's right. Let's talk about that, because that's a good point, Gio. And I think for me, the blessing was I was building a business, a company, an idea, product that was meeting my own needs. So I was a sports information director at a school, an athletic media relations director, and I'd seen how this had benefited and impacted me. So I knew it worked. I didn't need somebody to validate that idea because I was my own customer, right? I knew it worked. And so, yeah, of course, I started to have conversations with my colleagues and peers and talk to them. So I had some more informal feedback and knew I wasn't trying to introduce something that was completely off the wall and had no market viability. But I think that's something too, to not that you can't start a business or go into a field where you don't have as much expertise or knowledge, but if you can if you can kind of be your own customer and come up with something that solves your own needs, or wants or desires, meets those, then, that's market research right there, right? You've seen it through your own eyes, how this is going to help.
I mean, audience, the ones that have been paying attention, that what he just said right there costs hundreds, sometimes of thousands of dollars in consulting fees to get to. Right there, be your own client. And that actually, it's fun that you say that, because when I'm asked about my success, the one of those aha moments for me was when I started realizing, and luckily I learned this early, but I realized I have to constantly be my own customer, make sure that I'm comparing, my value in the market, product or service, with what else is out there for an option, for example, and then also using it to self-audit and to go through, a processes audit by putting yourself through. So I would regularly, especially when my family owned a restaurant, I would regularly go and sit in the restaurant, and I would tell the staff to treat me just like anybody else. I'd go wait in line in my own restaurant. I'd go wait in line. I'd see how long the wait was, right? Mm-hmm. I'd try to find parking, which was always a freaking problem, right? And from there, I would dissect and jump deeper and deeper into that process to say, where can I fill the holes? Right. Where is there something I can exploit or tighten the screws on, make something better and better, right?
Right.
So in the spirit of that, I know that behind every strong and successful person is always a story. And I know that as you and I have gotten a chance to get to know each other, I know that there's been several of these moments for you. So you're going to have to pick one. But these moments where you kind of get like two choices, either sink or swim. And in the business, I know we've all been in those situations. And those are the moments, looking back as older guys, you and I, it's easy to say, we saw that coming. But when you're new and you don't know that these moments might be life or death moments, yeah. These I think are important ones that we get to share with this younger generation, these experiences where you went into it blind. It's always easy to see 2020 in the rearview mirror. So can you tell, I know you've got probably a few of these, but can you pick one that might be really a pivotal decision? Tell us about what it was and what it did to grow your business. Why were you right about it?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've got one immediately that comes to mind. So again, as streaming was starting to become more ubiquitous, and we were getting a lot of our clients starting to say, why wouldn't I just use YouTube? Why wouldn't I stream on Facebook Live? Why am I going to pay you to stream games for me, right? And so what we had to decide is, what do we do here? And what I ultimately led our team to do is say, let's double down on our differentiators. And for us, we had two big differentiators. One was our customer support. That was always above and beyond, right? But the other was the experience that we provided. And by experience, I mean, we built a custom platform where when you're watching a game, you also had live statistics on there. You could chat, you could interact, right?
Cool.
And that had become a little bit dated, and there were not as many bells and whistles, and it wasn't quite as interactive as I'd like. And we ended up making a decision to throw close to $750,000 over a couple of years with a UX, user experience firm, to really just blow that thing up and recreate this new user experience, which, by the way, was the number one reason that the company that acquired us bought us, because we had this roadmap.
Wow.
Right. We had this roadmap, and
what a huge risk too. $750,000 dumping into an expansion that you're going kind of blindly into. So how did you get there? How did that, decision become so important? Like, how did you guys dig into it?
Yeah, so that I think it connects to another aha moment for me, which I'm going back to probably summer of 16 or 15. It was 2 or 3 years before we sold. But, if I'm being honest and I look back, we did not have a lot of structure to our business. We were growing, we had 20 employees, but, we didn't have a systematic way of holding meetings and strategizing. And I mean, we certainly did those things, but it wasn't very systematic. And I'll tell you I don't know if life-changing, well, it's probably not too strong of a word, but a life-changing book I read is called EOS, and it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's by, what's the guy's, Gino Wickman, I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, it's a pretty well-known book at this point, but EOS is basically this idea of systematizing your business and everything you do in your business, how you vision, how you meet as a team, how you hire and fire people, how you put strategy together. And I just bought into this thing. And so in the summer, I think it was in summer of 16, I believe, we implemented this whole concept, got our team on board. We started meeting systematically. And a big part of this is how you make decisions as a team. They have something called the issues list, where you're just constantly dumping opportunities and challenges and problems on this list. And then you come together as a team and you prioritize and work through those, and you meet quarterly to set priorities. And out of that is where we, as a team, me and my leadership team collectively begin to identify the biggest challenges ahead of us. And we had a system in place now to help us prioritize how we're going to address those. And so that's what ultimately led us to a team to say, hey, we've got to prioritize this new user experience platform, even if it means sinking more money into it than we probably should, because everything we're doing systematically now is pointing to this as kind of a critical moment in time for us. And so I think that reading that book, EOS, was an aha moment that in turn led to this kind of make or break, sink or swim, as you put it, decision that turned out to be kind of the linchpin for allowing us to sell.
So another thing too that I love about what you just said, Ryan, is something that we also talk about on the BlowOut Growth Network here, and on some of our videos, and that is, the importance of constantly keeping yourself educated and at the top of your industry with as much knowledge as you possibly can. And this entire interview that I've been listening to you, I think that is one of the consistent recurring themes that I hear inside of you, of how important it is and the importance of constantly keeping yourself up to date on things that matter to your industry. And it sounds like you were really good at that. And I didn't plan on asking you this question, but since I just said that and you just said that, I'm going to ask you, would you consider that to be maybe one of your superpowers as a businessman, as a human?
I would not, maybe directly being on top of what's going on. That's important. I would include that, though, in a more broad superpower of maybe just constantly wanting to learn,
make yourself better.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in the whole idea that I used to use, and it's not my phrase, but I like it, is leaders are readers. And so I would say over the last, especially 5 to 7 years, I've become a pretty proficient reader. And
yeah,
so I don't know if it's a superpower or not, but I do think it has opened my eyes to incredibly new insights, different ways of thinking, different ideas, different ways of leading.
When you love what you do, it's almost automatic, though, right? That you'll continue to seek out new information about it.
Maybe. I don't know, though, Gio, because I think sometimes people get stuck in what's known as a tyranny of the urgent, right? And you get so stuck in the day-to-day, and you're also, I heard a phrase the other day, you're in the bottle, and when you're in the bottle, you can't see the label on the outside, right? So you don't always,
it's a good one.
You can't always get perspective around what's going on, and sometimes you just get buried in all of that. And so it's, as much as you want to learn and read and grow, sometimes it's tough to break out of those other constraints and get there. So I think you do have to have some intentionality and some disciplined effort to say, I'm going to dedicate some time this week to reading. I'm going to dedicate some time to journaling, to thinking, to having a conversation with a team member that's nothing about day to day, but it's just about how we can learn from each other, whatever it might be.
Yep.
I do think it takes some effort.
Well, be deliberate in that pursuit.
Yes.
Schedule
exactly.
yourself, schedule some time.
So I had real quick on that point
yeah.
too. I wrote a blog last year called how a booth at Panera changed my life. And I had a booth at this Panera where I used to live in Arizona, where I'd go and I called it my 20% time, because I would try to spend at least 20% of the week there. And I would go and I would work on anything but the day-to-day of the business. Right. And there's something about getting outside of the spot where you normally do your work, where you normally interact, where you normally are doing the day-to-day, getting in another place where you can just think or write or focus on something that's going to help you either learn or grow in a different way. And your mind starts to associate. I don't have any studies that are going to maybe back me up on this, but I'm sure there are. Your mind starts to associate that place with a different type of thinking. And when you sit down in that spot, your mind doesn't immediately go to, okay, I need to check my emails. I need to do that. It's okay. No, this is time for personal growth or for learning or for whatever it might be. And so I think there's a big piece of advice I'd give to anybody, regardless of what stage you're at, is find that space where you can do, where you can get out of the day-to-day and focus on a different type of work.
I agree. And actually, Pastor Bob has actually got a sermon on something about the same topic, and he does actually have some study behind it. You should reach out to him. And it's very similar to the piece that he does about walking through a new doorway. It's the exact same thing that you're describing, and there's some there's actually studies that have been done, and I've read some of them through those. So you're spot on with that, and the psychology I think really matters. And something else too that I think matters, and I want to get into this in a little bit because I want you to tell everybody what you're doing now after Stretch. But before we jump into that, I just want to take a quick break with you to have a little bit of fun, to get to know you a little bit better. Did you prepare a 2 truths and a lie for us?
I did.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I would like to play 2 truths and a lie with you. And do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, beautiful.
So just to clarify, you want me to tell you 3 things potentially about me. 2 are going to be true, 1's false, and you got to guess?
I got to guess which one is false, correct.
Okay. So I'll give you these 3 things.
Okay.
I was stabbed in the knee by my cousin when I was 13. I've met 3 presidents. I'm married to a former Miss California.
Wow, those are good. And I know you and I don't know this. This is great. Oh boy. The stabbed in the knee is rough, but I've seen your wife. I know she's beautiful. I'm going to say stabbed in the knee is your lie.
I've met 3 presidents is a lie.
Oh,
I've met 1 president, but I was stabbed in the knee inadvertently. It wasn't intentional, but my cousin stabbed me in the knee and I had to have surgery, reconstructive knee surgery when I was 13.
Oh boy.
Yep. That was fun. And then, Lindsay, my wife, was 1996 Miss California.
That doesn't surprise me at all. She's great. Oh. If anybody gets to know her, man, you guys are amazing power couple. That's a topic for another.
I married. I mean, people say you married way up. I married like 73 stories up. I mean, I can't even. I need an elevator to get up there. So
it's so great to hear. That's fantastic. So. I do want to talk. So what happened post?
What about yours?
You wanted me to do? You want me to do mine?
Yeah.
Okay. Since you insisted. All right. For a short time, I used to be a professional golfer. I grew up surfing in California, and I am one of the top Overwatch gamers in the world right now.
I think the last one is the lie.
Top Overwatch gamers in the world right now?
Yeah.
No, I am. I'm one of the top Overwatch gamers in the world right now in 1 versus 1. Yeah. No, the lie is that I did not grow up surfing in California. I'm a Chicago boy.
Well, no, okay, so that's true. I knew you were from Chicago.
And you knew that.
I knew you were from Chicago, but I thought maybe at some point you'd lived out there.
Yep. No, that's why it's a good one, right? Because even if you know me, you may not know that, right?
Oh, that's true. I knew about the golf. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Wow. Well, thanks for playing that with me. I love doing that kind of stuff with people, especially if we know each other well, because there's always something in there that you're not going to know. That was a lot of fun. So now bouncing back to where you are in your timeline, and you've achieved this amazing success, and you got bought out by a company that, I mean, I've been looking them up ever since I knew what it was that you did, and it looks like they took what you did and made it better, and really took and did a good job with what they were given and what they took on. So here you are at this point in your life, and you sold, I'm gonna guess, at a place that kind of took some worries out of your mind that maybe you didn't have anymore, and maybe you could look towards this new chapter in your life without having to necessarily think about getting by, as a lot of people are trying to get out of their jobs. Would you say that that's an accurate depiction of where you are at this point?
For sure.
In the story?
That's been probably that's been a huge blessing of that you called it a liquidity event, but that transaction, that's been a huge blessing, is it's eliminated the need for me to worry kind of about the day to day.
And not having to worry about that day to day allows you to really, you've graduated now to this next level of, where can your skills and talents really be truly applied? And what an amazing point in your life that must have been for you. I'm sure it was scary at times. I'm sure it was challenging at times. Stopping, I definitely know firsthand, stopping something that you've done for so long can be very rattling, just from the day to day, because you're just not used to not doing what you've always done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here you are at this great moment, and what is on the horizon for you? What comes next for Ryan Ermeling at this point?
Yeah, no, it's great question, and great insights too, because you're right. It is, people think that, oh, you sell your business and, you write off the sunset and everything's great. I mean, there's been a number of times where I'm like, man, there should be a support group or books to help people go through that process, because not everyone already has their next lined up and is able to seamlessly and perfectly transition to that. And so I honestly had some challenges trying to figure that piece out, because I didn't want to just walk away and do nothing with my time. I wanted to be productive. And I also had this, part of the reason I sold was I was feeling this, going back to the faith component, I was feeling God putting this urge on my heart to do something maybe more directly tied to ministry, and to help ministry organizations out. And it's taken me a while to kind of flesh that out, I should say. But over the past couple of years, I've had the chance to start a new venture called 7 Marches. We do some consulting for churches and Christian schools, and the whole concept is trying to take business principles similar to the things that I learned through EOS, but also just in my 15 years of running a business, and create systematic principles we can help churches and schools implement now. And again, trying to think more like businesses, more innovatively, and then not necessarily, I think there's some resistance by ministry when I hear that, like, why? So we're just going to think more about profit. And it's not, we don't necessarily mean about profit. What we mean is think more like businesses do in terms of how you innovate, how you connect to your customer, to your stakeholders, how you meet and strategize as a team, right? Those types of things. And so out of that, the most recent venture is what you see behind me here, called Parent Pulse. And it's my initiative, or my idea to take this idea that you've always got to be connected to your customers when you're in business. And when we look at Christian schools, which is specifically my passion, how do we help Christian schools view their parents as customers? Because they are customers, and that's one of the hats they wear. They're paying money to send their kids to your school. And how are you constantly aware of what's on their mind and hearts, and what they're thinking, what they like, what they don't like? And so I've created an automated tool, a software as a service platform that's designed to constantly send out these micro surveys and gather feedback to help school leaders be more effective in knowing what's going on with their parents, and being more equipped to make data-driven decisions, and also hopefully help their retention, right? The idea is, if you're more attuned to your parents, you're going to have more people that keep coming back year after year, because you're doing things that are addressing their needs. So that's kind of the heart behind Parent Pulse. And literally, we just, built it over the past 8 months with a software developer, but literally just officially launched earlier this month. So we're brand new.
It's great. And it's funny too, because from the last time that you and I spoke, where you were telling me about Parent Pulse, it's funny, but on a separate note, there's been an incident that has occurred that I believe may not have occurred, and certainly may not have turned out the way that it did, if the school was using Parent Pulse. So I'll have to talk to you about that outside separately, but it was amazing because I've thought about Parent Pulse immediately. And I said, this could have been avoided. And here we are. It's right at home. It's right at our school. So, here's a perfect example of why what you're doing is so important. And another thing too, you mentioned it earlier, son of a pastor, and that you're focused on Christian schools. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you something that we do talk a little bit about out here. We've had a couple of guests feel comfortable talking about their faith, but how much a role of in your life is your faith, and how has it assisted you or helped you in some way to achieve the blowout growth? I know from a lot of going through these growing pains of any business, I think of all the time thinking about it from the customer's perspective, the audience, up against these decisions that when you're growing a business and you don't have a mentor, you don't have, that's part of the purpose of what we're trying to do with blowout growth. But when you don't have somebody else sharing some experience of something that you might be going through, how do you know? How do you know it's so important, right? So I offer that to you, Brian.
Yeah, no, I love that question. And it's funny. So there's a podcast, I think actually I introduced you to this podcast.
It's called fantastic.
How I Built This, right?
Yeah. By Guy Raz. I'm a huge fan. And I also like his other one too, the Wisdom from the Top, which is also really good.
Yeah, it is. But anybody on Blowout Growth, by the way, I think would benefit from listening to How I Built This.
Absolutely.
But he asks a question at the very end with every guest, where he says, how much of this was what your success was on your hard work, perseverance, skills, and how much was luck? And I hate that question because coming from a faith perspective in the background, I don't believe in luck. Now, let me sandwich this with the comment that I'm not I don't want to use too much jargon here or phrases that people might not identify with, but there's something called prosperity gospel. And there's a movement out there where you listen to certain people and they'll talk about, hey man, if you pray enough, if you're close enough with God, he's going to just make sure you're financially rewarded. You have everything you need and want. And that's not what I'm preaching or testifying to. But I do think that listen, if God he wants to be a part of every part of our lives, including our business life. And for me, I when I was young, I tended to compartmentalize that and say, oh, I need to pray and make sure that I'm putting God first in all of my personal decisions and my family and everything else. But business, I've got that. And I had a mentor along the way that kind of helped me realize, no, God wants to be just as much in your business as he does everything else. And so I began taking that mindset and praying before important meetings and praying as we went through struggles and challenges. And I think, God does want you to be successful and he will bless those efforts. It doesn't mean that he's going to shower you with financial windfall and make everything perfect. And, but if you have the heart of wanting to keep him first, if you have the heart of wanting to be generous, of using the blessings he's given you and returning those to him and to others. I do think there's something to be said for God wanting to help you be successful from that perspective, right?
Very, very much like what you're doing right now, sharing your experience with us, with me, with our audience, being able to, give back in that regard and spend some time with us. It's very self-prophesizing in that way.
Well, I appreciate that comment. I do think though that faith is such a big part of it. And again, I always draw that line because I don't want anybody to think I'm saying, hey, if you're not successful, it's because you don't have faith and you're not close to God or that God is always, there are, I firmly believe in Romans 8:28, which says all things work together for good to those who love the Lord, according to his purpose, right? And so I think God does things in our lives for our good, but also ultimately, even more importantly, to glorify him, right? So I think that's always my prayer is God, work through me and for my good, but ultimately help my business, help what I'm working on glorify you, help connect it to what I call kingdom purpose, right? How am I growing the kingdom? How am I ultimately helping more people know Jesus through the work that I'm doing? And so I think that's what God wants to do. I think he wants to use each of us. And so that's why I hate this question about luck, because I don't believe in luck. I believe, yes, You've probably seen it, but there's something to it where it says, work like it depends on you, pray like it depends on God.
Right? I like that. And I want to go back to luck for a moment too. It's something that we don't talk enough about, and you just inspired me. I think I'm going to do another video maybe on luck, but I want to tell you what I think about luck. I think that luck is what happens when opportunity meets preparedness. I think luck is kind of just like what we talked about earlier, working hard. It's just got this like implied definition that really, I'll never think about that again. What it really is. And I think that there's opportunity all around. And I think it's there for those that are prepared. And by prepared, I mean, what we just talked about and what you told everybody about is, educating. It's a combination of things that, you have educating yourself with what is, important in your industry, keeping your finger on the pulse, having a passion, finding something that you're passionate about so it doesn't feel like work. And then, having a strong faith, because sometimes, and what I was hoping that you would say, but I'm going to say it, there's a lot of prayer involved in building a business, and, praying for knowledge and wisdom, and, saying, whatever this part of your plan is, help me see it so that I know what I'm doing a little bit better. So I know that prayer comes into play as an entrepreneur quite a bit. And, it kind of just continues to grow from there. In being that entrepreneur and seeing, hey, I've got this hole to fill and I really feel confident about it. I've done my research. I kind of know what it is. And, I know that I know my stuff, right? Know your stuff. I know my stuff. I know I'm hearing this well. I've asked enough people, I've come up against enough decisions, and I feel like I can do this. And now I'm prepared for the grind of going back and forth on Sundays, for what, 12, 15 hours, 20 hours of, you're putting in, and then you have to repair and all, right. The litany of other hats that you wear as an entrepreneur that, are all part and parcel to really achieving that blowout growth. Cause you can't graduate unless you've done it all. I've learned that in the restaurant business for years and years. You can't ever grow a business if you don't know what it's like to wash those dishes and be in the trenches and really see what it's like to handle 250 people in 3 hours and have one or two people washing dishes for that many people. That hat that comes on and goes off as you walk into your garage, and you have to deal with your server farm, and you have to deal with the different things that are keeping yourself afloat, making sure that it's, streaming right, and it sounds good, and that there's not an overload, and the litany, right? The litany of things that you go through. And that's all part of it, right? That's all part of the successful entrepreneur experience. And I know you don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to ask you just one other question here, and
I'm good, Gio.
You're good for a minute. Yeah. Okay, you're good. So, but I'm not. So I got to cut at right around 2. But I think that I'd like to know for you, and I ask a lot of our guests this, not all, but right now, you've got a lot of experience, which, if there's any one thing that builds confidence better than anything else, it's experience. There's really just no comparison to having done something already in terms of being able to draw, a solid lesson from and make a good decision. So now here you are looking forward. But if you were to be talking to, say, your daughters or your sons or family members or close friends or clients or customers or people that you really care about, what would you say are the biggest challenges going forward? And I'm going to specifically ask you how I want you to answer that. Okay. What scares you the most and what excites you the most about where we are and going forward, being an entrepreneur in the world that we live in now, being a hustler or somebody that wants to make themselves better, get out of where they currently are, or just see blowout growth in what they're currently doing. What really scares you and what really excites you? What are those things, Ryan? Did you prepare for that?
Well, I saw the couple questions. I guess I didn't consider those 2 questions in that context. I think from it, I'll start with excite me most. I think what's exciting is, man, that it's technology, right? I mean, I look at when I started my first business back in 2003, and I mean, our first marketing effort was sending direct mail pieces to schools and trying to get them the word out that way. Now I look at the opportunities you have, and as I build this new business and the rich marketing funnels and automated all the automation you can bring in and incorporate and the different social media platforms you can leverage. I think if you do a little bit of self-education, which I've done in the last year, as I've started this new platform, this new business, I've had to, really dive into maybe some new types of marketing, right? So I think the information's out there, and if you can funnel it and learn efficiently about how to use technology to really attach growth to your idea, I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, you can really leverage technology in so many creative ways now. And I think that's what's exciting to me is just the opportunity out there from that perspective. It doesn't matter what your product or service is. There's a way to use technology creatively to leverage that and to get the word out, right?
Yeah, totally.
From a scary standpoint, wow. So I guess I'll go this direction with that question. And I don't know whether it's something like Shark Tank that has made this kind of the sexy way to do things, or you hear about Silicon Valley and all the investors on what's the famous Sand Hill Road out there with all the venture capitalists, et cetera. And I think people that are starting new tend to think that they've got to just start big, right? And they get so anxious that it's got to be this big, you got to invest a lot of money, and so I guess I'd have some fear that people are so intimidated by that idea. And I'd love to get back.
What a great answer.
I'd love to get back to this idea that you can bootstrap, man. Do it on your own. Start small if you need to. Experiment as you go. The whole lean startup idea: build, measure, learn. Right? Whatever. It's like that's almost getting undersold now. Get something out there as quickly and affordably as possible. Learn as much as you can in as short of a time frame as you can, and then improve and do it on an economic scale that's within your budget and that allows you to still grow and add prospects and clients as you go, but don't feel like you have to make this huge splash and invest all kinds of money and find people to fund this idea. Pretty much any idea out there, at least at some level, can be tested and put out in the field on a bootstrap budget. And so that would be my biggest fear, is that people just get in this mindset that it's all or nothing, right? That I've got to just blow this thing out from the get-go.
It's a really great answer, Ryan. And I do want to say that if for anybody listening that maybe wants more expansion on that, I'm going to give a little bit of expansion on that, because what he just said was that even in technology, the grassroots basics still apply. And that probably is one of the biggest takeaways I think you could get from a conversation like this in such a short period of time. To be able to say that, once you have your core down, once you know how it works and how you've got your elements in place that really do work, you can apply those immediately. You don't have to spin your wheels trying to go get all this crazy funding so you can throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. That it's still out there to be able, if you just hustle, you get yourself in the right mindset, you do things like what we're doing right here, listening to podcasts and to motivational speaking from people that are experienced and constantly educating yourself, making yourself better. Ryan, take us out. If there's anything that you want the listeners today or future generations that are hearing this to walk away with, what would it be?
Well, I mean, I'll just say one other thing. It's a book I've just read, so it's kind of percolating as we talk. But I would say for somebody this is maybe a little more granular, but I still think it's helpful for anybody who's starting a business or growing a business or launching a product or service. Know whether you have a painkiller or a vitamin, because it's going to change how you market and build and grow your product. What I mean by that is when you have a product, when you're trying to address an active pain of somebody in the marketplace, you've got a painkiller. And people are going to look and research for that and try to find that differently than they are a vitamin, which is something that they might not always know they need, but is going to provide long-term and sustained health for them. And so why I say that is Parent Pulse behind me is a vitamin. This is not something that's going to immediately address a gigantic pain point, although it sounded like it might have in the case you mentioned earlier. But what it is going to do for schools that use this is build long-term and sustained health, right? And because of that now, as I've marketed Parent Pulse, it's more of an educational campaign than it is a sign up now campaign, right? You've got to build over time. And so, again, maybe that's more granular than you're looking for, but I think one thing that I see a lot of people overlook is just that simple fundamental analysis of what kind of service am I providing? Is this something that's going to kill a pain immediately? Or is this something that I need to take some time and nurture and build and educate on? And that's something that the book, by the way, is called Hooked, and it's a great read too. So anyway, I
have read it. It is fantastic, and I think that little bit of information right at the end, folks, is a true pro tip and trick, something that comes from many years of experience, Ryan. So thanks so much for sharing that, and I love how granular you got with it, because that's exactly what the audience needs to hear. Some real practical things that you can take away. So everybody, pick one of the great things that you heard here today. Just pick one thing that you can implement in your day-to-day and go out and do it every day for a week and see how it grows and see the improvements that you make. There's been a ton of great stuff here. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And everybody, please like and follow us, turn the alerts on, and help pass the word around to anybody that you know that wants to level up their games. Take care. Thanks for joining us.